All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College, as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development Program, and in particular the AWD 1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases class, I've decided to create a series of video presentations based on the textbook that will be used for the AWD 1111 class during the fall 2019 semester. As you can see on your screen, the textbook is Pro ASP.NET MVC 5, an A-Press text by Adam Freeman. I'm working my way through Chapter 27 of 27, and I'm at the top of page 767. Now, I can sit there and read this to you, all right? But, I mean, let's face it, it's, first of all, not to be funny, but it's kind of boring. Second of all, you probably won't remember it anyway. So let's just hit a couple of the high points in here. The convention when naming an API controller action method is to prefix the name with the action method that it supports and includes some reference to the model type it adds on. All right. For the example, this means that a GET request results in a choice between get all reservations and get reservation. Okay? But method names like do get reservation and this is the get reservation would also be matched. To decide between the two action methods, the controller looks at the arguments that they accept and uses the routing variables to make what it considers to be the best match. Now they talk about REST here, and they say REST is a style of API rather than a well-defined specification. There is disagreement about exactly what makes a web service RESTful. One point of contention is that purists do not consider web services that return JSON as being RESTful. Like any disagreement about an architectural pattern, the reasons for the disagreement are arbitrary and dull. All right, the author says he tries to be pragmatic about how patterns are applied. And JSON services are RESTful as far as he's concerned. All right, mapping HTTP methods to action methods. The author says he explained the API controller base class uses the HTTP method to work out which action methods to target. It's a nice approach, but it does mean you end up with some unnatural method names that seem to be inconsistent with the conventions you might find elsewhere. All right. The system, excuse me, the system.web.http namespace contains a set of attributes you can use to specify which HTTP methods an action should be used for. You can see that we have applied two of these attributes in 2711 to create more natural action names. So we've got create reservation and update reservation. I'm just going to grab the entire web controller.cs file as is shown here on page 768, copy it to the clipboard, find that web controller that's right here, and replace what was in there with this. All right. That looks okay. All right. It says you can see the duplication with the MVC framework features and the web API. The HTTP post and HTTP put attributes that are used in listing 2711 have the exact same purpose as the attributes with the same name used in Chapter 19, but they're defined with the web space system.web.http and not system.web.mvc. In fact, if you look at the top here, you'll see that system.web.mvc is not even one of the using statements that's in here. All right. Bottom of page 768, using a knockout for single-page applications. The purpose of creating the Web API web service is to refactor the example application so that operations on application data can be performed using AJAX requests where JSON results will be used to update the HTML in the browser. The overall functionality of the app will be the same, but we will not be generating complete HTML documents for each client-server interaction. The transition to a single-page app puts more of a burden on the browser because we need to preserve the application state at the client. We need a data model that can be updated, a series of logic operations that can be performed to transfer the data, and a set of UI elements that allows the user to trigger these operations. In other words, we need to create a miniature version of the MVC pattern in the browser. The library that Microsoft has adopted for SPAs, or single-page apps, is Knockout. As mentioned, as you see on the top of the screen here, Knockout creates a JavaScript implementation of the MVC pattern, but really more accurately the MVVM, or model view model pattern that was described back in Chapter 3. It is sufficiently close to the MVC pattern, so the author is going to treat them as though they're the same. In the sections that follows, the author says he will return to the MVC framework side of the example app and apply the Knockout library to create a simple SPA. Now, I did want to mention one thing. It says Knockout does a lot more here, and you can go to their website. That's fine. But I did want to mention, because when we were looking for a book to use for this class, one of the ones that I thought of using, what is it, ASP.NET, I'll just put it here, Knockout, PDF. That's it, ASP.NET MVC5 with Bootstrap and Knockout.js. This is an O'Reilly book. I think it's got a fish on the cover. There it is. And this is one I thought of recommending that we use for the class. But if you look at it, Intro to MVC, Intro to Bootstrap, Chapter 3 here, which is not a real long chapter. In fact, most of the chapters in this book are fairly short. This is what, about 9 or 10 pages. All right. Intro to Knockout.js. I thought this was a pretty good book. So, the first thing that we have to do here is to add the Knockout and jQuery files to our _layout.cs HTML file. So right under our links to our CSS, we'll put in this. All right. As it says, we will be using Knockout to create the MVC implementation and jQuery for handling of AJAX requests. All right. Implementing the summary on page 770. The first major change to make is to replace the summary partial view with some inline Knockout and jQuery. You don't have to use Knockout in a single file, but the author wants to leave the partial views intact so we can see the difference between the standard MVC framework way of working and the spot techniques. In listing 2713, you can see the changes that have been made. All right, this is page 770 and 771. we made these changes here to the index.cs HTML file. And what I think I'm going to do is shrink this down. You know what I do by now. So I'm going to shrink this down, copy it to the clipboard, go back and find my index.cs HTML file. Oh, that was interesting. I don't want to move it. I don't want to move that either. So we're going to be adding this. Again, don't worry if we get errors or whatever. It's not a problem. And then going to the next page and adding all of this. All right. I see no errors, which is always a good sign. All right. And the author says, there is a lot going on here, so I'm going to break down the changes and explain each of them in turn. The overall effect of the changes is that the browser uses the Web API controller to get details of the current reservations. Okay? All right, bottom of page 771. jQuery has excellent support for making AJAX requests. To that end, we have defined a function called send AJAX request. So that, I believe, is in here then. There we go. That will be used to target methods on the Web API controller as shown right here on page 771 on the bottom of the page. The $.ajax function provides access to the jQuery AJAX functionality. The arguments include the URL you want to request and an object that contains configuration parameters. The send AJAX function is a wrapper around jQuery functionality and its arguments. The arguments are the HTTP method that should be used for the request, a callback function that will be involved, or invoked I should say, when the AJAX request has succeeded, and an optional URL suffix. Next, we've got the get all items, which, as they mentioned here, targets the get all reservation controller action method and retrieves all of the reservations from the server. The remove item function targets the delete reservation action method and calls the get all items function to refresh the data after we've done a delete. Well, like I said, these are going slowly. We're on the middle of page 772, so we've got approximately 15 pages to go, but I'm going to pick it up there on the middle of the page for defining the model in the next lesson.